Hi, everyone. Today's guest is Mike Agranoff. Mike's been with the Folk Project for years and years, and I'd like him to tell you a little bit about the amount.
Project. I said,
Go ahead.
since before it was the Folk Project.
Why don't you tell us about your early days then?
Well, the Folk Project is a lot of you, some of you may be watching this that don't even know anything about the Folk Project is currently and has been for 40 some odd years an alleged organization of musicians, music lovers, dancers, and what have you that puts on concerts and weekend getaways and has television shows and dances and various other musical activities. It's entirely volunteer run. And it came out of an earlier organization that started in the late 60s into the mid 70s called Project 21. And that eventually disbanded when the woman who was kind of the mother of the whole thing got burned out from doing all the work and essentially moved away and left us. So the rest of us who were left decided we wanted to continue this. So we actually turned it into a real organization with some structure and designated tasks for different people that weren't dependent upon a single person. And that was called Folk Project. Project 21 started a coffee house in 1975. And I attended the opening night of that coffee house on my 30th birthday, July 25th, 1975. And 2 years later, there wasn't a Project 21 anymore. And I was the guy in charge of the coffee house. And ever since then, after going through 3 name changes and 6 or 7 changes of venue, it became what it is today, the Troubadour Acoustic Concert Series, and I do the booking for that for the Folk Project.
Yep, and for those members who are not familiar with the Troubadour, definitely need to look it up. Go to folkproject.org on the internet and keep an eye out for that. Now, obviously, as Mike will tell you, the pandemic has shut that down. We can't have people rubbing elbows with a pandemic going on, so.
So it's right now, instead of that, we're doing a twice a week video production called the Folk Project Acoustic Stay Away. And that's actually the page you'll land up on when you go folkproject.org. It forwards to that, the information on all the online concerts we're holding.
Yeah, once we get back to some semblance of normal, we can get back to the Troubadour, I'm sure.
Can't wait.
And some great shows, by the way.
I'm going to have to wait.
Now, the pandemic has hit everyone in different ways. Tell us how you're faring.
I'm doing about as better than a lot of people. I live alone, so the isolation is not a brand new thing for me. Sort of used to that, but I do miss the music. I do miss my friends. I'm retired from my professional job. I was a mechanical engineer designing machinery, which loved the job, but got laid off of that in 2011, and so now I'm retired. As I said, I miss the music. I miss contra dancing. I love dancing, and I miss all my friends who are very largely just about. All of them are associated with the Folk Project in one way or another. And I miss my girlfriend who lives in Vermont and I haven't seen since February.
Yep, that's difficult. I certainly empathize with anyone who is living alone, such as yourself, not having loved ones, being able to hang out with friends.
But on the other hand, there are so many people who were so much worse affected with it. I really can't complain.
Yeah, I always count my blessings. I found a wonderful person a few years back that I knew, believe it or not, from high school. And we got married a few years ago, and perfect partner to be with during this pandemic. So how about getting your supplies, getting your foods and stuff like that as
Not
seniors?
much of a problem. I do my own shopping. The supermarkets around me are empty enough so that I can, well, I mean, not empty, but it's easily to maintain social distance in the supermarket. And I'll, buy local when I can,
Mhm.
and like everyone else, I'm ordering other stuff online.
Hey, Mike,
So
have you been
I'm
able to
not.
get all the supplies you want? Have you found the things that you really need?
Yeah, there's nothing I want that I can't get one way or another, except perhaps technical advice on something.
All I know is if you plug it into the wall, it's supposed to work. That's all I can tell you. Now, I know that our folks are not here to listen to us jabberjaw. So what I'd like to do is to ask you if you'd like to give us your first song. I want you to tell us a little bit about it.
I'm not a singer-songwriter. I'm more a singer-song finder, and since I'm, as Booker of the Troubadour, I am exposed to so many wonderful songs. I have a wealth to choose from, and this is one written by my friend Peter Fishman. Used to be a neighbor of mine here in New Jersey, but moved up to Massachusetts. The song is called The Highway, and ostensibly it's about a little section of Massachusetts, Route 2, just west of Cambridge, where he was living at the time. But in the larger sense, it's that road we all travel back and forth to work on, or used to, never really see. Got a lovely chorus if you can pick it up and sing. In a swamp along the highway, tall trees stand bare, stripped of bark, while overhead the herons build their nests, the trees gray light, the nests brown dark. The birds all wheel away in summer, each nest stands open to the weather, till in the spring, when heron flocks return to raise their families together. This is how the story goes now and then. If you listen, you can hear. We may meet again, who knows where or when, with the turning of the year. We may meet again, who knows where or when, with the turning of the year. Fallow fields along the highway, corn stalks scattered on the dirt, last summer's bounty harvested and sold, the cold, cold ground remains inert. Till in spring, when sun shines longer, the earth responds to warmer weather. The stalks decay, the plowman makes his way, mixing the stalks and soil together. This is how the story goes now and then. If you listen, you can hear. We may meet again, who knows where or when, with the turning of the year. We may meet again, who knows where or when, with the turning of the year. Cycle of seasons, tempest and time, effects of planetary motion around the sun. The bluest blue moon still tugs the tides around the ocean. drivers all along the highway, mostly on their way to work. They're weaving in and out across the lanes, this one polite, that one a jerk. Most like me work in some building, completely cut off from the weather. And at day's end, we barrel round the bend, all forward bound together. This is how the story goes now and then. If you listen, you can hear. We may meet again, who knows where or when, with the turning of the year. We may meet again, who knows where or when, with the turning of the year.
Very nice. Very, very
Thank you.
nice. Thank you, sir. What was the name of that song?
It's called The Highway.
The Highway. Lovely song. How did you get involved in music? What was your introduction to the?
Well, I took piano lessons, classical piano lessons as a kid, but when pianos turned out to be too big to bring to parties, I picked up the guitar. And basically, I've always been a kind of a show-off. I was always a class clown and stuff like this. So this gives me the performing and playing for other people gives me a socially acceptable excuse for saying, "Hey, look at me." It gets that out.
I understand that. Now I know that music has not been how you earned a living. What did you do for most of your life to put food on the table and a roof over
Well,
your
as I
head?
said, I was a mechanical engineer. I designed machinery. I loved the job. I loved the job. It was like, oh boy, it's Monday. It's time to go in and solve puzzles. And it's like I just dive into it and trying to get something to, you know, for most of my career, I was designing packaging machinery for a small privately owned company in the food and medical packaging machines, and it was trying to pick up this product and put it in here in this orientation and stuff like that, and make sure that it does it every time and doesn't take people's fingers off and stuff like that. If you ever watched the cable TV show How It's Made, I mean, I was the guy that designed that kind of machinery, and I loved it. It was this wonderful challenge. You come in Monday and solve puzzles all day.
So it
Play
sounds
video
like
games.
you probably have at least one favorite band or favorite group or
Yeah,
favorite singer. Who would that be?
my current favorite performing artist is Susan Werner. Just hands down. And my favorite all-time performing artist was Stan Rogers.
Okay. Now, thinking back to your work in music, if you had an ability, now this is any artist, living or dead, I don't care who it is, if you could work with or open for or be in a show with a particular artist, who do you think you'd choose?
Well, I once was on stage with Pete Seeger, and that was pretty cool. But I think Utah Phillips, because he was such a great storyteller, and I'm a storyteller as well. It's really hard to pick my favorite, but those two come to mind.
How about TV? Do you watch a lot of TV?
Well, very little broadcast or cable these days. There's almost nothing on that's worth watching, but I actually spend more time than I would really like in front of the tube, either on Netflix and Amazon Prime, or also YouTube, um, just mostly to mindless unwinding. But my tendencies, my proclivities are towards documentaries, both historical and also technical, history of the steam engine or stuff like that.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
the engineer in me. And um, there's a series these days that I'm watching a lot of called Vsauce. That V hyphen SAUCE. All sorts of really interesting technical, mathematical, and philosophical musings, anywhere from 6 minutes to half an hour. Um, just brilliant stuff. This guy I wish I had as a teacher when I was a kid, in school.
I have to confess, my wife and I have subscribed to Acorn TV and to BritBox, and we're watching all the old British shows. It's actually not, they're not old. Some of them are current British shows.
Yeah, I was in, I had a trial subscription to Acorn, and I found that I liked the concept of a lot of them, but the execution didn't make me want to spend money
Well,
on them.
we found a couple of gems within
I'll talk to you after the broadcast. So
absolutely, but we found there is a lot of dross out there. Finding those gems can be difficult. Okay, I think we've talked enough. Why don't we do another song? Why don't you give us another one of your songs?
Okay, we're gonna have to pause for a minute because I do this one sitting down, so we'll have to readjust cameras.
All righty.
All right. This is an English concertina, an instrument that I never had any particular desire to own or play or learn until one day I was presented with the bargain I couldn't turn down. And so I found myself in possession of this black and silver white elephant here. And okay, this is interesting. How does it work? 48 anonymous buttons, not even black and white. We've got a scale in here someplace. Didn't make any sense at all. So I went to the only guy I knew who played one of these things, and he explained it to me, and it didn't make any sense at all. This is the stupidest instrument in Christendom, I tell you. Look, you see, you got 4 rows of button on each hand. Now, the 2 center rows, that's the white notes of the piano, alternating from one row to the other as you walk up the scale of the C at the same time as walking up one hand to the other. Wait. Wait a minute. Here it is. How foolish of me not to have seen. It's just insane, which leads to complications. The first of which you realize the first time you pick the thing up and discover that no matter how hard you try, you can't see both hands at once. And looking at one hand doesn't do any good because half the notes are on the other hand. So it immediately becomes a totally non-visual instrument. The whole visual cortex of your brain goes on vacation to Hawaii, which results in the famous concertina player blank stare. But I've come to really love the instrument. It's used for fiddle tunes. I play Bach on this thing. And it's also a great song accompaniment, and it's perfect accompaniment for this next song. This is a song written by Grant Bainham, an Englishman. And if there was a Grammy Award for the song with the best opening line, This one would win it hands down. The song is called First Kiss. The first one ever I kissed, apart from my cousin Janine, who doesn't count because of the wart, was a long-legged, red-headed pearl of a girl whose second name I never quite caught. She was as old as Eve in her eyes and wise in the ways of men. When Rebecca was 11 and I was a tongue-tied 4-eyed twit of 10. Her folks had a cozy summer cottage, Coleman stove and proper privy in a shed. We had a ramshackle cabin with a camp bed and a bucket with a curtain round instead. They had a tricked-out Vanagon. We had a clapped-out Chevy van back when Rebecca was 11 and I was a no-account, no-nothing nipper of 10. Ever since then, oh, ever since then, it's never been the same and it will never be again as when Rebecca was 11 and I was 10. Rebecca in the willow, in the hollow by the river, in the long hot summer of the best year ever, and ever and ever. Amen. Alan said he'd seen down Rebecca's shirt, he said, and what he said he'd seen looked sort of flat. I told Rebecca I didn't care a heck of a lot for things like that, and Alan is a brat. She sort of smiled like they shouldn't, like they do, although I didn't know they shouldn't do then. When Rebecca was 11 and I was a new and clueless clown of 10. Follow me down, and we'll climb the pussy willow in the hollow by the shallow river turning. So she climbed, and I followed, and I looked up the leg of her shorts, which at least shows I was learning. We sat in the willow in the hollow by the shallow of the river where the minnow dodged the pike. And Rebecca put her two tanned arms behind her head and said, "Go on then. You can kiss me if you like." And the golden down on the brown of her skin, and the moon white star on the point of her chin, and the eucalyptal taste of sin for the first time. And ever since then, oh, ever since then, it's never been the same and it will never be again as when Rebecca was 11 and I was 10. Rebecca in the willow, in the hollow by the river, in the long hot summer of the best year ever, and ever and ever. Amen. And I never saw Rebecca again. Isn't that a delicious little
It's
song?
wonderful. I love that.
It didn't happen to me, but I was there. I can still feel it. Ooh.
You just got the muse inside my brain running now. I'm saying, "Oh, I could write something like that." Oh, that's a great song. Thank
English
you very much.
concertina.
I know that for many people, they love to hear themselves talk. They love giving advice. They love making sure that you know that they know how to solve every problem in the world. And whether we ask for it or not, they're going to give us some kind of advice. Now, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice I ever got. He prompted me with this question before this interview, so I had time to think about it. The best advice I ever got was from a fellow by the name of Bob McNally, who was a luthier. I shared a house with him for about a year and a half in, I think in 1976 or thereabouts. And before I moved in, he told me, if you have a problem that I'm doing something that bothers you, tell me, talk to me, let's get it out and let's find out, let's see what we could do to solve it. That was one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard. I don't give it to other people, but I take it from other people. I take, I listen to what people say. I probably should tell people to because I sometimes annoy people, but it made our cohabitation so utterly bumpless.
Correct.
So that I've remembered that all my life.
Great advice. That's truly great advice. I think the best advice I was ever given happened when I was in my early in my working career, and well, I shouldn't say early. It's probably in my middle age area, 35, 40, in that area. A friend of mine who I had met through the internet in its early days told me that when you're applying for a new job, when you're going for something, and you want to go for something that's not going to bore you. So you don't want to know it by heart. You don't want to have said, I know everything about this. What more can I learn? You want to try to go for a job that's maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone. Go for a job that's a little bit difficult. And this is advice I took very seriously from him. And I found it to be amazing in getting ahead in the world, because most companies, most people, if you're going to work for someone, they're going to teach you what they want you to do, and they're going to teach you how they want it done. If you already know, chances are you've learned bad habits, or at least that person will interpret some of the actions as bad habits.
Or you don't do it the way they would want it done.
Exactly. So that was great advice I got from him, and I took it forward over the next 20 years of work, and it did well for me.
Good.
When you come up with new music, what's it like? What's your creative process like?
Well, again, since I'm not that much of a writer, I do write some stuff, but most of what I do is gleaned, and so I wait until I hear something that really grabs me, and I said, okay, that's what I want to do. Let's see if I could put my own stamp on it. So it could be that, like for instance, that first Kiss thing. Grant Bainham, who wrote it, plays it on the guitar, mostly single noting the melody as he plays it, which I started to do with the concertina, but then I added those strange jazz chords, the diminished, demented chords in there that really ends that air of mystery to it. So that I wasn't planning on doing that, but that's what came out. The instrument probably did that for me more than my own brain, because I don't understand those chords all that much. But if I hit a note that's, ooh, I'll keep that.
Great. All right, here's a good one for you. What is the most useless talent that you have?
Well, the most useless talent that I have, I may not still have it, but when I was younger, I could hold my hands like this and jump through them.
All right. Well,
I learned I could do that in high school gym class. They were giving me, the gym teacher was doing exercises. He says, put your right leg through, take it out, put your left leg through. And then as a joke, said both legs through. And I did.
I know where I would have wound up, on my face, that's for sure. I have, so many things that we could talk about and find.
No. Favorite
Why
song?
don't we do favorite?
Favorite song.
Why don't you show us what your favorite song is?
Well, I will, but first of all, let's rearrange stuff to stand up again, because that's on the guitar.
And while Mike does that, I'm just going to fill you in a little bit about what we have coming up in some future shows. Mike is one of our longtime members of the Folk Project, and I've been asking for other longtime members to give us their music and stuff. So if you know of anyone who's interested in performing on the show, doing an interview on the show, certainly let us know right away, and we'll get that person, we'll get in touch with that person, see if we can't make it happen.
Old gospel tune. Every day as I travel on my way to the city far beyond the sky. And there's not a doubt time's running out and the harvest is a drawing nigh. I need a little time to gather in the grain before I leave the world behind. Yes, and I'm ready when you call me, Lord. Won't you give me just a little more time? It's give me just a little more time, Lord. Give me just a little more time. So many precious souls are lost in sin, many may be left behind. And I've got a lot of things I need to do before I leave the world behind. Yes, and I'm ready when you call me, Lord, but give me just a little more time. To lay before the Lord, before the final judgment day. Need a little time, preach His holy word to the sinner man along life's way. Every moment that I have to tarry here below, try to make my lamp to shine. You know that I'm ready when you call me, Lord. Won't you give me just a little more time? Just give me just a little more time, sweet God. Won't you give me just a little more time? So many precious souls are lost in sin, many may be left behind. And I've got a lot of things I need to do before I leave the world behind. Yes, and I'm ready when you call me, Lord, but give me just a little more time. It's give me just a little more time, Lord. Give me just a little more. So many precious souls are lost in sin, many, many, many may be left behind. And I've got a lot of things I need to do before I leave the world behind. Yes, and I'm ready when you call me, Lord, but give me just a little time. Tell you I'm ready when you call me, Lord. Won't you give me just a little more time?
Thank you.
And that's my favorite song to play. If I try another guitar, somebody else's guitar, that's what I play on it. Because that's the one that is the best.
Watching you play that, you can see what my fingers look like. I think that we have probably provided a smile or two for our viewers. I think that some of the stories that we've shared between the two of us are probably things that a lot of the viewers also have similar tales to tell. And one of the most amazing things that I've found being a member of the Folk Project, as I am today, is that we have a large amount of talent from which to draw. I have seen and heard some absolutely incredible songs that, you know, people would find difficult to avoid if it were on air regularly. And, they just hasn't gotten a chance to get out there. So that's why I like to bring our members onto the show, give them a chance like you. And I know.
I really do thank you for that. That's a great service to our performing members. We have probably, I'd say of our 500 members, about a third play music to one extent or another, whether it's professional or semi-professional performing, or in a church choir, or by themselves, or in the shower or something like that. But there are a number of them that either make their living through music, or more like me, do it as a kind of a full-time hobby.
I hear that. I guess I find that with those talented people that are out there, there are gems. And because I had the opportunity to talk to you prior to this interview, I know that you have a hidden gem out there, although it is not a song. And I know without a doubt that our listeners would love to hear that. And before we get on it, I just want to warn them that there is a very brief profanity in the song, in the recitation. So if this offends you, I apologize. And we're going to do it anyway.
Turn it off now.
That's right.
Okay. This is, as he said, a recitation. It's a long, disused art form that was quite popular in the 17th, 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries. It's narrative poetry, stories told in poetry. Robert Service, or I forgot who's the author of it, Casey at the Bat, things like that. That's fallen out of favor much, and it's gotten kind of a dorky reputation, but in good hands, it can be gripping. And this, I hope, is for you. This is a story about the radio, about that period of time in the late 60s, freeform radio. And I don't think it needs much more explanation than that. It's called The Ballad of the Sandman. When the broadcast room's a living tomb of cracked acoustic tiles, and you're left alone with your microphone and your playlist and your dials, and the hands upon the studio clock pass midnight and creep towards 1, it's time to take the air once more, and the graveyard shift's begun. The day shift and the engineers have all left hours ago. You close the heavy soundproof door and set your board aglow. Cue the first 2 records up, settle in your chair, uncap and snap the transmit switch, and you're on the air. There's magic in the radio, enchantment in the ether, a power born of mind and brain, and yet a part of neither. A power to be reckoned not in kilowatts or joules, Joules, a means to let a single voice touch 500,000 souls. But when you work that graveyard shift from 1 a.m. to 5, you start to doubt that anyone's out there or alive. The halls are lifeless, the phone is dead. And there's nothing quite so lonely as to call with kilowatts, and in reply, hear silence only. They usually stick the rookie jocks in the lonely graveyard slot, but me, I broadcast nights by choice. I like that shift a lot. Because when I get the lonelies, as I do from time to time, I recall the Sandman's final show of 1969. 1960s radio was awful at its best. I grew up with cousin Brucey and the Wolfman and the rest, and between the fast talk and the hype and the Acne lotion jingle and station breaks with sound effects, they'd maybe play a single. But that was all there was back then, and that was all we had. And nostalgia finds a way to sift the good from all the bad. And so intertwined was radio with fond scenes of my youth that it's tinted with a rosy glow that overlays the truth. Oh, and summer parties at the beach and every high school date. Those midnight drives in my dad's olds and studying till late. They're all movies in my memory. And behind them, I still hear the Beach Boys and the Beatles and the Motown, oh, so clear, to the counterpoint of DJ hype and ads for wrangled beer. But then in '67, FM burst upon the scene. What once played only Bach and Brahms became a rock fan's dream. Between the sparse commercials, they played 3 songs in a row, album cuts and full-length versions, played in stereo, and gone is all that mile-a-minute brainless DJ chatter and singing station breaks and other oral fecal matter. Instead, these guys with wit and charm told what they had to tell and spoke as if they thought that I might have some brains as well. I got to know them all by voice that summer. And come fall, I'd hung around the station till I came to know them all. Bill Clancy in the morning slot, Aunt Stacy, Charlie West, and the Sandman. He was different and apart from all the rest. Paul Sandman did the overnights. He had a special style. He was older than the others, been around a while. He'd segue different album cuts in a stream of consciousness around, do theme sets, live concert tapes. Boy, he made listening fun. And though he must have known my name, he always called me Kid. But he let me watch him work and explain the things he did. And once or twice, he snuck me in the studio late at night and let me cue the tapes and records up to my delight till I wandered back home, bleary-eyed as it was getting light. And while the records spun, he sat and talked of days gone by when radio was younger, and so was he, so was I. While round his lonely Kansas farmhouse, snowdrifts blew and curled, the radio was a living color window on the world, he said. There was magic in the radio, enchantment in the ether, a power born of mind and brain and yet a part of neither, a way to take you miles and years by means unknown to science. Nah, but it's since become a jukebox, nothing more than an appliance. I can tell you got the itch, kid. You'd like to be a jock. Give it up. Magic's gone. There's nothing left but schlock. You deal with all the crazies and the drugged out suicide calls, and the sponsor and the FCC have got you by the throat. And programming tells you what to play. They take no denying. You read copy advertising, crap you'd never think of buying. The hours are long. The pay is squat. Vacations. But then the cut would end, and he'd face the mic and weave magic once again. Sure enough, he read me right. Guess he could recognize a little of his own obsession shining from my eyes. And when I left for school that fall in higher education, my first step was to make a beeline for the radio station. Throughout my freshman year, I learned the ropes and paid my dues. I engineered, did commercials, swept, read the news. By the time I was a sophomore, I'd earned a weekly show. I was on the graveyard shift, but I was on the radio. And I learned Paul Sandman was a name that every DJ knew. The trade rags did his story. He got a piece of Newsweek too. And sometimes playing album sides from my deserted station, I'd tune in his show on my headphones just for inspiration. And so it was on New Year's Eve of 1969. School was out, they'd all gone home. Station was all mine. Yep, there was I, the rookie jock, left holding down the fort, well stocked with day-old pizza pie and coffee by the quart. They had me work a triple shift from 8 p.m. to 8 playing records no one listened to while partying till late. And CBS had hooked lines across the country to Times Square. And at midnight, we'd switch over to a live broadcast from there to hear the famous ball come down and ring in the new year. By 11:10, it got so dead you just could not believe. Who the hell's listening to the radio New Year's Eve? So I queued up Tommy. That would kill a half an hour or show. Kicked off my shoes, plugged in my phones, tuned in the Sandman show. Something's different. Something's wrong. I knew right off the bat. He's playing straight top 40. His voice is sounding flat. There's dead air between his cuts. His spots all run too long. Inside of 15 minutes, I knew something there was wrong. I let him start a record and dialed up his private line. He answered with his call letters, and I replied with mine. Oh, hiya, kid. Hey, tell me, ain't you got a better way to spend your New Year's Eve with some busted down DJ? Well, heck no, I'm on the air myself. I got lots of time, and I listen to your show because it's better far than mine. But tell me, Sandman, what's with you? Is everything all right? It seems to me if you're somewhat off your stride tonight. Everything is not all right, he answered with a frown. The Arbitron reports came out, and our ratings have gone down. And Harry Stein in programming is determined that the way to get the ratings back on top is dictate what I play. So here I sit with list in hand that says at 10:15 I should play the Righteous Brothers, followed by the Cream, and then a public service spot, and then some Moby Grape. They don't need a DJ. They can put this crap on tape. It's December 31st. The year is coming to an end, and with it ends a decade. And an era too, my friend. And in 27 minutes, I'll switch over to Times Square. But when I return in 70, you tune in if you care to hear how good the radio could be, if it would dare. He broke off at that point to cue up another platter, and I said goodbye. The Who were almost finished for that matter. And exactly 27 minutes later, more or less, on cue, I flipped the switch to hook us in with CBS. And while thousands in New York bade fond farewell to '69 and Guy Lombardo and his orchestra played Auld Lang Syne, I raised my slice of pizza in salute to the new year and once more to the Sandman at the end of his career. When the network show was over with, I went back on mic. I did some inane comment about the future and the like. Did a station break, queued a record up, and then tuned my headphones in and turned the Sandman in again. Welcome, he began, to 1970 radio. You've noticed in the past a certain blandness to this show. Seems Harry Stein's determined what your music taste should be. Well, fuck you, Mr. Harry Stein. And fuck the FCC. I've had my fill of radio. This here's my final hour, but the door's locked and bolted and I'm on internal. I suppose they'll find a way to get me out eventually. But until then, you'll see how good the radio could be. And then the music started. And the magic came on strong, and how the sequence brought to light a hidden meaning to each song. Where he got those tapes and records, I'll never know. Old favorites I'd forgotten, live recordings from some show. You can get anything you want at Alice's restaurant. And you can't always get what you want. Where have all the flowers gone? To-do, run, 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 to-do. The Beatles singing German, Dixieland on 78, Benny Goodman, Walter Carlos, Bessie Smith, The Roommates. This is more than playing records. This is genius. This is art. And this is something altered here, and damn, I'll do my part. I open the equipment cart and stove beneath the board and rummage through the junk there till I find the proper cord, patch headphone out to preamp in, adjust the input power, and the Sandman show gets relayed out through our antenna tower. I reach out to the telephone, dial WBVA, and it's answered there by Sharon Smith, their overnight DJ. Hey, Sharon, Paul Sandman's just flipped Harry Stein the Bird, putting out the best damn radio you've ever heard. And there's a brotherhood amongst the radio voices of the night. They stand behind a fellow jock. They see he's in a fight. Sharon had to listen but a moment, then was gone to find a patch cord of her own to send the Sandman on. And then the phones, that long I thought were dead, began to light as the calls came in from miles around from listeners in the night. Whence comes this wondrous music, they would ask. And I would smile. And how come I pick it up on every station of the dial? And through the night, the signal spread from station onto station as the DJ sent the Sandman and his magic crossed the nation till Sharon called me, laughing, shouting like she was on fire, saying, listen, someone's put the Sandman on the network wire. Oh, that's right. The lines to New York were still hooked nationwide. I flipped the switch to listen in and laughed until I cried. The Sandman must have reached some hero New York engineer, put him on the wire for the whole damn world to hear. There was magic in the air that night, enchantment in the ether, a power born of craft and pride, and so much more than either. And all across the country sat the overnight hardcore and shared the Sandman's magic, till at 20 after 4, he stopped to say goodbye as they were breaking down the door. New Year's Day dawned cold and gray with just a touch of sleet, and many a jock by 9 o'clock found himself on the street. Me, I came off cheap. A reprimand was all I got. But New Year's night, a new voice broadcast from the Sandman slot. And since that night, the radio's become my occupation. I'm now a big shot DJ at a major FM station. But when the hours start to drag and the night's going slow, I cue up an album side, crank up my headphone stereo, and tune into the Sandman, now on satellite radio. And when the broadcast room's a living tomb of cracked acoustic tiles, and you're left alone with your microphone and your playlist and your dials, though the airwaves seem a graveyard of lifeless whitened bone, there's always someone listening in, and you're really not alone.
I can't say anything about it. That's perfect. I'm just absolutely perfect.
Thank you.
For those of us who grew up during the heyday of FM radio, the stations, the disc jockeys, as you said, there were people with incredible intelligence and charm, and they would tell us stories.
Musical taste.
Yeah, and they would tell us
broader
stories about
than
the
just
artists.
The top 40.
Yeah, it wasn't top 40. It was the heart.
Well, it was top 40 plus.
Yeah,
and it depended on the DJ. Some of it wasn't, some of it was. But there were some brilliant people. Pete Fornatale, Jonathan Schwartz. Who was the other one on WNEW? Scott Muni. Not he wasn't the one. Yeah, but I was the one I was thinking of. Anyway, Idiot's Delight. Oh well. But really the biggest one that was my model for the Ballad of the Sandman was a DJ who's still on WPRB on Sunday nights, a guy by the name of John Weingart. His program is music you can't hear on the radio. Out of Princeton.
I know a lot of these disc jockeys have gone on to satellite radio, as you said. Others we've lost, and it's a sad thing to know that wonderful era has passed, and the kids that are out there today just don't have a clue as to how good radio could be.
And how much of it is dependent upon the personality of the guy presenting it, not only his musical taste, but the way he presents, his knowledge of the stuff behind the music and so on. Pete Fornatale was one who just knew just about every one of those rock stars and folk stars personally. There's an incredible story. How Pete Fornatale actually discovered Ballad of the Sandman through a strange set of circumstances. But when he did, he had me come into the studio and do an interview and record that. And then he played that recording of Ballad of the Sandman on his Mixed Bag show just before New Year's Eve, every year from, I think, 1983 until the day he died. And
I'd like to think that we have probably piqued the interest of many of the folks that are out there listening to maybe want to investigate the story behind the Pete Fornatale story behind the scenes here. So I'll make sure that gets posted for you, and we'll make sure that we get that URL out there and your email address out there as well. Well, that's it for this interview, and that's it for our discussion with Mike. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. I found it very enjoyable and entertaining. I think that we have given some great stories and a little history of you and the music that you love to our audience. So thanks again.
And thank you for running this show.
And if you ever want to come on again, if you ever have a thought to do, even if it's not a whole set, maybe a little bit that you'd like to do.
Believe me, I got plenty of material.
And don't forget, we also
by the way, thank you for doing this and keeping the name of the folk project out there. for people to know.
Very happy to do so. And I look forward to hopefully doing this even after the pandemic.
Okay. Good night.
So, thanks, and we'll talk soon.